If the Minecraft community does one thing well, it's adding new content to the game. And in most cases, this new content actually feels like it belongs in Minecraft. Take this fire wand for example, which was an idea submitted by you using blueprints. But hold on, what even is a blueprint? You see, a while back, I gave my Discord access to my blueprint workshop, where they could submit their ideas for what they wanted to see added to Minecraft, in the form of blueprints. So in this video, I'm going to create the best weapon blueprints submitted, and after I make each one, I'll even have my good friend and fellow YouTuber Aimzel judge them on a scale of 1 to 10. Starting with our first submission from Mushroom, the Traveler's Flute, which they said would freeze mobs in a radius around the player, acting as a sort of getaway item in a tricky situation. A perfect idea for the first weapon of the video. So for this model, I started laying out some cubes, and the idea I had in mind was a pan flute design that would be made out of bamboo and charge up kind of like a bow. But when used, it would shoot out a radius on the ground of where mobs would be stunned, along with playing a few notes and maybe even a bit of knockback. The model itself for the flute would be pretty simple, just a few cubes and a single plane that I would later texture as a feather. So once I got it positioned in the player's hand, I got right into texturing. I started by laying on the main colors and turned each tube into a hollow looking bamboo cylinder. Looking at references to older versions of the pan flute, I also included a colorful band around the main body, which honestly, I think really fits Minecraft style. Speaking of, one of my main goals in this video was making items that actually feel like they fit in vanilla Minecraft. I've made some pretty complex weapons in the past, but there's just something so charming about the simplicity of Minecraft, and I can only hope the judge would agree. And as a final touch, I added a small feather, giving us our completed model. And I really like how this turned out. But the real question was, what did our judge think? And it was time to hop in game and get our rating.
This looks quite interesting, because it's not exactly like your typical weapon like a blade, but instead it's a musical instrument. But aside from that, I actually really like how this model looks for a few key reasons. Number one, it fits Minecraft's theme perfectly, and in my opinion, Sneak loves to make really bold and flashy weapons, and this is a little more laid back and more in line with what I think Minecraft is. Not only that, but the crafting recipe for this just makes so much sense. You can literally see in the model that this is quite clearly bamboo, and this over here is a feather, and that seems to be like a fabric of sorts, and the crafting recipe, I mean, it just ties everything together very cohesively and very nicely. Now, onto the item's ability, which is also very intriguing. While it does seem quite overpowered on the surface, its lack of durability does balance it a little and it makes up for it. And as the name of the item suggests, it's a Traveler's Flute, which I assume it's kind of like a getaway utility tool to escape hostile mobs as you're traveling, but it can also stun passive mobs as well, which I'm sure would have some fun practical applications to that as well. My favourite thing about this item is definitely its model and how well it fits the Minecraft aesthetic. I can honestly see Mojang adding something similar to this in the future in a cool update or something like that, so overall, I'd give this one a solid 8.5 out of 10.
Our next blueprint comes at us from Dalian, the wand. This wand would shoot fire charges that cause explosions, and would be fittingly crafted using a fire charge and a stick. It's crazy to me that this isn't already in Minecraft. For the next model, I began building the wand's handle, and the idea here was pretty obviously going to be a fire-themed wand, with an animated red aura and gold accents. For the sake of balance, I didn't want the wand to one-shot, but I planned to make the fireball shoot faster than an arrow with little to no charge. So after getting the handle to the right size, I had to figure out what to do with the top of the wand. I knew I wanted some kind of floating red orb, but I had no idea how to go about the accent pieces on top. Luckily, the Blockbench wiki has a Minecraft style guide, where I realized I should be using 2D planes rather than full cubes way more than I already do. So I set a few planes in place and moved on to texturing. After laying down some simple base colors and defining a light and dark side of the model, I found out a pretty neat trick. If I copied the handle and made it a tiny bit larger on each side, I could add even more accents to the overall simple model, which makes the texture feel way more defined than just painting layers on one cube. I also had to change the texture of the orb, as it's very difficult to make transparent textures work in Minecraft. Then came the animated texture, and I'm not even gonna try to explain how this worked. But hey look, 2 hours later, and we've got pretty light. I also took the liberty of changing the color scheme to create a water wand as well as an earth wand. I figured if we were already adding one element, we may as well full send the idea and let people pick their favorite wand. With that done, the models were completed, and I'm actually super happy with how they turned out. So let's bring them into Minecraft and hope the judge agrees.
So immediately, this is quite eye-catching. Not as subtle as the previous item and quite flashy. The animated textures on this looks really cool, and I honestly do like the bold design with the sort of orb on the top. It doesn't look all that out of place in Minecraft in terms of the design, but I'd say it doesn't quite match the aesthetic just as well as the previous item. The crafting recipe also makes a lot of sense, just like the flute, but when we take a look at the ability of this wand, which by the way is pretty damn cool, I personally feel like replacing the wind stick with something else like a blaze rod would better justify the amount of uses you get out of this staff, since it seems to be quite overpowered. Back to what I was saying about its ability, the explosion it creates upon impact looks really nice. This is one of those weapons where you just kind of fire dozens of times for no reason because of how entertaining the visuals of the explosions are. So I'd say I'd give this one a good 8 out of 10. Now, we have two more wands that share very similar designs to the Wand of Fire, but they're based off of different elements, you could say. The Wand of Water is quite interesting because it doesn't directly damage entities in the same way that the Wand of Fire and Earth does. It shoots a bubble that raises whatever is captured into the air and bursts after it reaches a certain height, and they will take fall damage as a result. I actually think the crafting recipe for this is perfectly fair because it requires you to look for buried treasure, and the ability isn't terribly overpowered for what it does. The animated textures on the bubble looks really nice, but because it bursts at a set altitude, I believe there can be some issues when using it on high elevation terrain, but overall I can see more people going for the Wand of Fire because it has more direct combat utility, so I'll give this one a solid 7 out of 10. Now, the Wand of Earth, from what I have seen, is probably my favourite out of the set. The fact that it requires a grass block to craft is a very interesting angle to take, which means you'll either need a Silk Touch tool or an Enderman to pick it up and die to obtain it. The ability, in my opinion, is just as cool as the Wand of Fire because, as you can see, it causes a mini earthquake in the direction you attack. As such, it can definitely be a very useful AoE weapon for when you're in a bad situation, and unlike the Wand of Fire, I don't think you can accidentally blow yourself up with it, so I can see this having more practical use than the Wand of Fire. Sneaker's done a very good job not making any of these plain and boring, and the same goes with the Wand of Earth, so I'm gonna rate this one a good 9 out of 10.
The last blueprint comes at us from Chief, the Situation, who submitted the Destroyer, a melee weapon made out of pure will and blessed with light that would drive the wielder crazy. There's a lot of room for interpretation here, and I want a good rating on this, so this is going to be fun. So instead of the obvious sword or axe, the idea here was a trident that, being blessed with the light, could manipulate time and allow the wielder to change the time to day using epic VFX. If overused though, it would cause negative effects ranging from nausea all the way to instant death. So I started this model by maxing out the size and seeing how much room I had to play with, and then made sure to set the weapon in the player's hand where the weight would make sense. I then made sure to use my newfound skills of 2D planes and extruding the handle before heading into texturing. Here, I started erasing parts of the planes until the shape of the trident slowly revealed itself. I then went for a gold and white color scheme to fit the concept of it being made out of light. And after giving it a sort of weapon glint animation, I actually started on the VFX the Destroyer would summon. I wanted this effect to totally encapsulate the player and be clearly powerful by radiating aura. So after animating a gold pulsing effect that turned out actually insane, I was ready to take it in game. But before I show our judge, I just wanted to mention that these videos take a ton of effort to create, and I run into a lot of issues that don't make the final cut. What the f? So if you enjoy this content, consider subscribing, and definitely comment which of these weapons was your favorite. But without further ado, let's show my work to Aimsel and get our rating.
To start off with, this weapon looks very different from the previous ones. It looks badass, first impressions. The idea behind the weapon being made of pure will and might definitely add to that as well, and the way the weapon functions is very unique to say the least. I love the concept of the weapon requiring the use of the user's sanity because, like I just said, the weapon is made of willpower, and with the crafting recipe requiring gold blocks and glowstone, it all comes full circle back to the idea that this weapon is something mythical or legendary. And the animated shine on the tip of the spear definitely agrees with that. The melee damage is quite high, but it's compensated with its lower attack speed, but the real fun is in its ability to change the time of day. Also, the fact that repeatedly using its ability without letting your sanity heal will cause all these negative effects on the user is great. It adds to the complexity of the weapon, but it doesn't feel excessive because of what the weapon is. So yeah, honestly, I have very few criticisms to make about the weapon. If I had to make one, it's the fact that because of how insane the weapon is, it stands out quite a bit, and it doesn't really fit the theme of the game quite as well as like the Traveler's Flute, for example. But to be honest, if you had this weapon and all its glory, that's not something you would really care about. So because this is easily the coolest, most badass and unique tool Sneak has showcased thus far, I'll give this one a 10 out of 10.
With that, I got Aimzel's stamp of approval. And if you want to make your own blueprint, go check out my Discord. And be sure to comment which weapon was your favorite in the comments below.